The great hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with angry voices. Representatives from over 200 species filled the circular chamber, their attention focused on the holographic display floating in the center. The image showed a sleek, dark vessel with unusual angles that seemed to hurt the eyes if one looked too long. "This human warship breaks at least 17 fundamental laws of physics," shouted Delegate Mox, their blue tentacles waving in agitation. "We cannot allow such a thing to exist." At the edge of the hall, Captain James Miller of the United Earthship Paradox stood calmly, his weathered face showing no emotion. Beside him, Dr. Emma Reed fidgeted with the control pad in her hands, occasionally making adjustments to the hologram. "Delegates of the Council," Miller said when the shouting died down, "the UES paradox does not break any laws of physics. It simply bends them when needed." This statement caused another wave of outrage. The Council President, a tall being with silver skin named Trell, raised all four of his arms for quiet. "Captain Miller," Trell said when silence returned, "your species has been part of our galactic community for only 50 years. You must understand our concern. Every advanced civilization here built their technology on the same understanding of physical laws. What you claim to have done is impossible." Miller nodded politely. "With respect, President Trell, humans have a different view of the word impossible. To us, it often just means not tried hard enough yet." Dr. Reed stepped forward. Unlike her captain, she looked nervous, her eyes darting around the room. But her voice was steady when she spoke. "The paradox uses what we call reality distortion field technology," she explained. "It creates a bubble around our ship where certain physical constants can be adjusted." "Adjusted?" a reptilian delegate hissed. "Physics is not a setting to be changed." Reed pressed a button on her pad, and a hologram changed to show the inner workings of the ship. "We discovered that the universe is more flexible than previously thought. What you call laws are more like strong suggestions." The council chamber erupted again. President Trell looked genuinely disturbed. 6 hours later, Miller and Reed returned to the Paradox, which sat in the council's special docking bay. The ship looked even stranger in person. Its hull seemed to shift slightly when not observed directly. "That went exactly as expected," Miller said, rubbing his tired eyes. Reed sighed. "They're afraid. I understand why." As they walked up the boarding ramp, the rest of the Paradox's senior crew waited for them. Lieutenant Tom Walker, the tactical officer, stepped forward first. "How bad is it, Captain?" he asked. "Bad enough," Miller replied. "They're voting tomorrow on whether to force us to dismantle the ship." Chief Engineer Marcus Bell snorted. "They can try. I'd like to see them even understand how to take her apart." The ship's doctor, Ava Jones, shook her head. "We knew this would happen. The Council has operated the same way for thousands of years. They don't like surprises." The group made their way to the bridge, a circular room with stations arranged around a central command chair. The walls displayed a view of space outside, as if they weren't there at all. Miller settled into his chair. "The problem isn't that they don't understand our technology. The problem is they're afraid of what it means." Walker nodded. "Their whole civilization is built on the idea that certain things are constant. We just proved they're not." Reed connected her pad to the main system. "The Paradox can ignore inertia when needed. It can adjust its mass. It can even bend light around itself in ways that shouldn't be possible. But we're still learning what it can do. And what it should do," Jones added quietly. Miller was about to respond when a loud alert sounded. Walker moved quickly to his station. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal. High priority." "Source?" Miller asked. "The Teller colony in the outer rim," Walker replied, his fingers moving over his controls. "They're under attack." "The Teller?" Bell asked. "They're one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy. Who would attack them?" Walker's face grew grim. "Signal describes the attackers as the darkness that consumes, whatever that means." Miller straightened in his chair. "How far to Teller?" About 7 light days at conventional drive, Reed answered. The captain's eyes narrowed. And with our drive? Reed hesitated. 2 hours, maybe less. But Captain, the Council expressly ordered us not to use the reality distortion field while in Council space. Miller stood up. Are there any Council ships near Teller that could help? Walker checked his readings. Nearest patrol is 3 days out at their top speed. Then we have no choice, Miller said. He pressed a button on his chair. All hands, prepare for departure. Engineering, ready the RD field. Bell grinned. Already warming up, Captain. Reed looked concerned. James, this could be seen as a direct violation of Council orders. They already want to take the ship apart. This will give them more reason. Miller's face hardened. I didn't join the fleet to follow rules while people die, Emma. Neither did you. She nodded slowly. No, I didn't. Good, Miller said. Walker, plot a course to Taylor. Bell, I want full power to the RD field. Dr. Jones, prepare medical for possible casualties. As the crew rushed to their stations, President Trell's voice came over the communication system. Captain Miller, our sensors detect your ship is powering up. You are ordered to remain docked until the Council reaches its decision. Miller pressed the response button. President Trell, we've received a distress call from Taylor Colony. They're under attack and need immediate assistance. We are aware of the situation. Trell replied. A response fleet has been dispatched. Your fleet won't arrive for 3 days, Miller said. We can be there in 2 hours. There was a pause before Trell spoke again. By using your illegal technology? Absolutely not. You will remain docked. Miller looked around at his crew. They all nodded. I'm sorry, President, Miller said. But where I come from, we don't let people die when we can help. Paradox out. He cut the communication. Walker, get us out of here. Council security ships are moving to block our exit, Walker reported. Miller smiled. Dr. Reed, I believe this is where your adjustments come in handy. Reed returned the smile and moved to her station. Activating reality distortion field. Adjusting our mass to near zero. The ship hummed with power. Outside, Council security vessels moved to surround the Paradox. Now, Walker, Miller ordered. The Paradox shot forward, but instead of crashing into the blocking ships, it simply passed through them as if they weren't there. What just happened? Jones asked, gripping her chair. I adjusted our phase state, Reed explained, her hands dancing over controls. For a brief moment, we existed slightly out of sync with normal matter. Bell laughed from engineering. In simple terms, we became ghosts. As the Paradox cleared the station, Reed activated the main drive. Space itself seemed to bend around the ship. Reality distortion field at full power, she reported. Bending space-time in 3, 2, 1. The stars outside streaked and vanished, replaced by a swirling tunnel of light. Miller settled back in his chair. Set a course for Teller. Let's show the galaxy what this impossible ship can really do. Behind them, the Council's outrage faded into the distance as the human warship that defied every law raced to answer a call for help. The HFY Paradox dropped out of its reality-distorted travel with a flash of light. The ship returned to normal space above the planet Teller, a blue-green world with 3 small moons. But the beautiful view was spoiled by the scene of destruction unfolding before them. My God, whispered Dr. Reed as she stared at the main screen. A dark, shifting cloud surrounded one of the orbital stations. The cloud wasn't smoke or gas. It seemed to be made of millions of tiny particles that moved with purpose. As they watched, the cloud enveloped a section of the station, and when it moved away, that section was simply gone. What is that thing? Lieutenant Walker asked, his fingers already moving across his tactical controls. Captain Miller leaned forward in his command chair. Full scan, all frequencies, and open a channel to any survivors. The bridge crew worked quickly. Dr. Jones looked up from her medical scanner with concern. Captain, I'm reading thousands of life signs on the station, but they're fading fast. Walker's face hardened as he studied his readings. The cloud seems to be consuming both matter and energy. It's not just destroying the station, it's absorbing it. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. The main screen flickered, showing the face of a teller. The teller were known for their calm nature, but this one looked terrified, their large eyes wide with fear. "This is Administrator Kell of Teller Station 1, the alien said, voice shaking. "Unknown ship, please identify." "Administrator, I'm Captain James Miller of the UES Paradox. We received your distress call and came to help." Relief washed over the teller's face. "Humans, the Council said help would take days to arrive. We have special technology," Miller said simply. "What is that cloud attacking you?" "We call it the Void Swarm," Kell explained. "It appeared 3 days ago at the edge of our system. It consumed 2 of our research vessels before we could even warn them. Then it came for the station." The transmission crackled with static. "Our weapons have no effect. 3 Council ships already tried to help. They were consumed too." Miller exchanged glances with his crew. "How many people on your station?" "Nearly 6,000. Kell replied. "We've evacuated some to the surface, but the swarm is blocking our main docking areas now. We're trapped." Miller nodded decisively. "We're going to help you. Stand by." When the transmission ended, Miller turned to his crew. "Options." Chief Engineer Bell spoke first. "If this thing eats energy, conventional weapons will just make it stronger. And mass readings suggest it's already consumed several thousand tons of matter," Walker added. "It's growing." Dr. Reed had been quiet, studying her data. Now she looked up with a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Captain, I think I know how we can fight this thing. The swarm seems to absorb matter and energy in a way that follows conventional physical laws. But our ship doesn't have to." Miller nodded. "Explain." "We can use the reality distortion field to change the rules," Reed said, moving to the main display. "If the swarm expects matter to behave one way, and we make it behave differently, we can confuse it," Miller finished, "or hurt it." "Exactly," Reed said. "I can modify our weapons to fire projectiles that change their properties mid-flight. The swarm won't be able to adapt." Bell grinned. "And I can rig the engines to emit energy at frequencies that shift randomly. It won't know what to absorb." "Do it," Miller ordered. "Walker, take us in closer, but maintain distance until weapons are ready." The Paradox moved toward the station, its unusual hull gleaming in the light of Teller's sun. On the station, the teller watched with hope as the strange human ship approached. Inside the engine room, Bell and his team worked feverishly to modify the ship's systems. The reality distortion field generators hummed with power as Reed made her adjustments from the bridge. "Weapons ready, Captain," Walker reported after 15 tense minutes. "Modified torpedoes loaded. Reality distortion field configured for combat," Reed added. "But I should warn you, we've never used the field this way before. The strain on the ship could be significant." Miller nodded. "Noted. All hands. Battle stations." The crew secured themselves as the Paradox moved toward the Void Swarm. The dark cloud seemed to notice the ship approaching and separated from the station. A tendril of darkness reached toward them. "It's coming for us," Jones said quietly. "Fire first salvo," Miller ordered. Walker pressed the launch control. 3 torpedoes shot from the Paradox, heading straight for the approaching tendril. As they flew, the torpedoes began to change. Glowing, shifting, their very matter transforming from solid to energy, and back again. The Void Swarm engulfed the first torpedo, but instead of being consumed, the torpedo's distorted matter caused a visible ripple through the cloud. The second and third torpedoes hit different sections with similar effects. "It's working," Walker shouted. "The swarm is recoiling." Miller allowed himself a small smile. "Keep firing. Reed, increase distortion field around the ship. Let's show this thing what happens when it picks on humans." The battle that followed was unlike anything the watching teller had ever seen. The paradox moved in impossible ways, sometimes seeming to be in multiple places at once. Its weapons fired energy that changed form mid-flight. When the swarm tried to adapt, the paradox simply changed its approach. On the bridge, warning lights flashed as the ship groaned under the strain. Hull stress at dangerous levels, Bell reported from engineering. The reality distortion field is pushing our structural integrity to the limit. Can we hold together long enough to drive this thing away from the station? Miller asked. Bell hesitated. Maybe, but I can't promise we'll have enough power left to get home. Miller nodded grimly. One problem at a time. Walker, target the main body of the swarm. Full salvo. The paradox unleashed everything it had. Weapons that shouldn't exist fired energy that changed its nature every microsecond. The void swarm, faced with something it couldn't consume or understand, began to retreat. It's working, Reed exclaimed. The swarm is pulling back from the station. Indeed, the dark cloud was withdrawing, moving away from both the station and the paradox. Soon, it had retreated to the edge of the system. Keep sensors on it, Miller ordered. Make sure it's really leaving. As the immediate danger passed, the crew allowed themselves to breathe again. Miller opened a channel to the station. Administrator Kell, the swarm has retreated. What's your status? Kell's face appeared, showing both relief and amazement. Captain Miller, you've saved thousands of lives today. 3 Council warships couldn't even slow that thing down, yet your single ship drove it away. How is this possible? Miller exchanged glances with Reed. Let's just say we have a different approach to problem solving. As the paradox helped the teller station with repairs and medical assistance, news of the battle spread quickly through Galactic Council channels. The human ship that had defied Council orders had also defied a threat that conventional ships couldn't handle. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, an ancient species took note of the unusual ship and its even more unusual methods. The humans had rediscovered something that had been hidden for millennia. Something that would change the galaxy forever. 3 days after the battle at Teller, the UES Paradox drifted in space, its engines running on minimal power. Emergency repairs had allowed the ship to move away from the Teller system, but not much farther. The reality distortion field had pushed the vessel beyond its design limits. Captain Miller stood in the engine room, where Chief Engineer Bell and his team worked tirelessly on repairs. Exposed wiring hung from ceiling panels, and the main generator hummed unevenly. Give me some good news, Marcus, Miller said. Bell wiped sweat from his brow. We've stabilized the main power grid. Life support is secure. But the reality distortion field generators. He shook his head. They're fried, Captain. We pushed them too hard. Miller nodded. So we're stuck with conventional drive. For now, Bell confirmed, which means we're 3 weeks from the nearest human outpost. As Miller was about to respond, Walker's voice came over the comm system. Captain to the bridge. Urgent. Miller hurried through the corridors of his damaged ship. When he arrived on the bridge, he found the crew staring at the main view screen. A ship had appeared near them, unlike any vessel Miller had ever seen. It was enormous, at least 10 times the size of the paradox. Its shape reminded Miller of a giant leaf, with veins of light pulsing across its surface. It had no visible engines or weapons, yet it radiated power. Where did that come from? Miller asked. Our sensors should have detected it before it got this close. It just appeared. Sir, Walker replied, his voice hushed with awe. 1 second it wasn't there, and the next. Dr. Reed was scanning the vessel, her eyes wide. Captain, that ship is using technology far beyond anything in the Galactic Council database. Its whole composition doesn't match any known material. Are they hailing us? Miller asked. No, sir. No communications at all. Miller straightened his uniform. Open a channel. When the communications officer nodded, Miller spoke clearly. This is Captain James Miller of the United Earth Ship Paradox. Please identify yourself." For a long moment, there was no response. Then, without warning, a beam of golden light shot from the alien vessel, enveloping the paradox. "Shields," Miller shouted. "No effect, sir," Walker reported. "The beam is passing right through our shields, but it's not causing any damage." Reed checked her readings. It appears to be a scan of some kind, extremely detailed. As suddenly as it had appeared, the beam vanished. The bridge crew waited tensely for what would happen next. A voice filled the bridge, not coming through the communication system, but seemingly from the air itself. "Captain James Miller, we have been watching. You may call us the Elders." Miller exchanged glances with his officers. The Elders were considered a myth, an ancient species said to have withdrawn from galactic affairs millennia ago. "What do you want with us?" Miller asked. "To speak," the voice replied. "You and your science officer will come aboard our vessel." Reed's eyes widened. "Us? Why?" "You have discovered what was hidden. You must learn the truth." Miller frowned. "Why should we trust you?" A pause, then. "We offer a gift of good faith." Another beam shot from the Elder ship, this one blue-white. It focused on the Paradox's engine section. Bell's surprised voice came over the comm. "Captain, the reality distortion field generators. They're repairing themselves." Reed checked her console in amazement. The damage is being reversed at the molecular level. This technology is incredible. Miller made his decision. "Dr. Reed and I will come aboard. Lieutenant Walker, you have command until we return." Walker looked worried. "Sir, with respect, this could be a trap." "Maybe," Miller acknowledged, "but they could have destroyed us already if they wanted to. And I need answers." 20 minutes later, Miller and Reed stood in the Paradox's teleportation chamber. They had no idea if the Elder ship had compatible technology, but the voice had instructed them to prepare for transfer. Reed fidgeted with her scanner. "I've never been this nervous or excited at the same time." Miller smiled slightly. "First contact with a mythical species will do that." Before Reed could reply, golden light surrounded them. There was a sensation of movement without moving, and suddenly they stood in a vast circular chamber. The room defied explanation. Its walls seemed to shift between solid and transparent. The floor beneath their feet felt both hard and somehow yielding. And at the chamber's center stood 3 tall figures. The Elders were humanoid, but clearly not human. Their skin shimmered with a pearl-like luster. They had no visible hair, and their eyes were large, solid orbs of deep blue. They wore simple robes that flowed like liquid. "Welcome," spoke the tallest Elder. Its voice had no discernible gender. "I am Keeper of Memory." Miller stepped forward. "Thank you for your invitation, and for repairing our ship." The Elder inclined its head. "The damage was our responsibility, in a way. You used knowledge that was not meant to be rediscovered so soon." Reed couldn't contain herself. "You know about our reality distortion technology." The second Elder spoke. "It is not your technology, human scientist. It is the original science, knowledge that existed before the current order of the galaxy." The third Elder waved a hand, and the chamber transformed. Suddenly, they stood in what appeared to be space itself, with stars and galaxies surrounding them. "Long ago," the Keeper of Memory explained, "the first civilizations understood that reality is fluid. What you call laws of physics are merely the most common arrangements of possibility." Images appeared around them. Ancient ships that bent and twisted in impossible ways, worlds being reshaped by technology, stars being moved like game pieces. "This knowledge gave power beyond imagining," continued the Keeper, "and led to war beyond comprehension. The beautiful images were replaced by scenes of destruction, planets shattering, entire star systems being consumed by strange energies." Miller watched in horror. "What happened?" "The universe nearly ended," said the second Elder. "To prevent total destruction, we and the other surviving species agreed to impose order. We established fixed physical laws and locked away the knowledge of how to change them. Reed's scientific mind raced with implications. You're saying you deliberately limited how the universe works. That's necessary, the third elder finished. For billions of years, species have evolved in this simplified universe. They built civilizations based on consistent physical laws. The Galactic Council's entire foundation relies on this consistency. The Keeper of Memory turned to face them directly. And then humans came along. Your species thinks differently. You question everything, even reality itself. Your ship, said the second elder, has accidentally rediscovered fragments of the original science. The way you bend what you call reality is primitive but functional. It is like a child finding a forgotten weapon. Miller frowned. We meant no harm. We built the paradox for exploration, not war. Yet you used it in battle, the third elder observed. To save lives, Miller countered. Against something called the Void Swarm. It was consuming the space station. The three elders grew very still. They communicated silently among themselves for a moment. The Void Swarm, the Keeper finally said. We had hoped it was contained forever. Reed stepped forward. You know what it is. It is a weapon from the ancient war, explained the Keeper. A self-replicating entropy accelerator designed to consume matter and energy. It should have been locked away with the other remnants of that time. If it has truly returned, said the second elder, then the seals on the old knowledge are breaking. The simplified physics we imposed is beginning to fail. And your ship, the third elder added, with its crude manipulation of reality, may have accelerated the process. Miller felt a chill. Are you saying we're responsible for this threat? No, the Keeper replied, but you may be necessary to stop it. The Council's conventional weapons cannot defeat the swarm. Only the original science can counter it. Reed looked both terrified and fascinated. You want us to use our ship against this thing, but we barely drove it away. We don't fully understand how our technology works. We will help you understand, said the Keeper. But first, you must decide. Will you accept this burden? Once you learn the truth, there is no going back. The Council will fear you even more than they already do. Miller straightened his shoulders. If people are in danger, human or alien, we have a duty to help. That's what Paradox was built for. The elders seemed to approve of his answer. Then let us begin, said the Keeper of Memory. It is time for you to learn what reality truly is. Captain Miller and Dr. Reed returned to the Paradox with minds full of impossible knowledge. The elders had shown them things about reality that contradicted everything modern science believed. They had learned that the universe was not a place of fixed rules but of flexible possibilities. The crew won't believe what we've seen, Reed said as they materialized in the transport room. Miller's face was serious. They'll have to. We have work to do. Lieutenant Walker was waiting for them. Captain, you were gone for 3 hours. We were about to send a rescue team. He looked at their faces. What happened over there? Call the senior staff to the conference room, Miller ordered. We need to talk. 30 minutes later, the command crew sat around the conference table. Miller and Reed had just finished explaining what they had learned from the elders. Let me get this straight, said Bell, rubbing his temples. The laws of physics are actually optional. Not optional, Reed corrected, but more like guidelines that can be adjusted under certain conditions. The elders helped establish the current physical constants to create stability after a devastating war. Dr. Jones shook her head in disbelief, and our reality distortion technology accidentally tapped into this original science. Exactly, Miller confirmed. What we thought was a new human invention was actually a rediscovery of ancient knowledge. Walker leaned forward. And the Void Swarm is a weapon from this ancient war. One that could potentially destroy the galaxy. Yes, Miller said grimly. The elders believe it escaped from a containment system that has held it for millions of years, and it's growing stronger with everything it consumes. But here's the good news, Reed added, activating a holographic display. The elders have upgraded our ship. The display showed the Paradox's systems, now glowing with new energy pathways. Our reality distortion field is 10 times more powerful and more stable, and they've given us blueprints for weapons specifically designed to fight the swarm. Bell whistled. I've been wondering why the engines felt different. The power output is incredible. So what's our mission? Walker asked. Miller stood up and paced the room. The Void Swarm is heading toward the galactic core. If it reaches the heavily populated systems there, billions will die. We need to stop it. Alone? Jones asked incredulously. Shouldn't we contact Earth? Or the Council? Miller shook his head. The elders advised against it. The Council fears our technology. If they learn what we now know about reality, they might panic. Besides, conventional ships would be useless against the swarm. So it's just us, Walker said quietly. Not entirely, Reed interjected. The elders told us about other species who preserve fragments of the original science. Outcasts from the Council who might help us. Where do we find these outcasts? Bell asked. Miller activated a star chart. There's a system near the outer rim. The Nomad Nebula. The Council avoids it because its radiation interferes with standard navigation systems. But not with ours, Reed added with a small smile. Miller nodded. We set course immediately. The elders will delay the Council while we gather allies. 2 days later, the Paradox arrived at the Nomad Nebula. Swirling clouds of purple and green gas obscured normal visibility, but the ship's enhanced sensors cut through the interference. I'm detecting artificial structures, Walker reported from his station. Multiple ships, and what appears to be a space station hidden deep in the nebula. Any signs they've noticed us? Miller asked. Hard to tell. There's a lot of energy distortion in this region. Reed studied her readings. Captain, the patterns in this nebula aren't natural. The radiation has been deliberately modified to create a hiding place. Before Miller could respond, a voice came through the communication system. Unidentified vessel, you have entered protected space. Identify yourself, or be destroyed. Miller nodded to the communications officer. This is Captain James Miller of the UVS Paradox. We seek the Forgotten Ones. There was a long pause. How do you know that name? The voice finally asked. The elders sent us, Miller replied. Another pause, then, hold position. Escorts are coming. Minutes later, 3 small ships emerged from the nebula. Their design was unlike anything in the Council registry, organic shapes with hulls that seemed to pulse with life. Those ships, Reed whispered, they're using biotechnology combined with reality manipulation, just like the elders described. The escort ships surrounded the Paradox and guided it deeper into the nebula. Eventually, a massive space station came into view. It appeared to be built into an asteroid, with structures growing out of the rock like crystal formations. The Paradox docked at the station. Miller selected a small team to accompany him. Reed, Walker, and 2 security officers. When they stepped onto the station, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with beings from dozens of species. Some were recognizable, others completely alien. What they all had in common was that they were using technology that should not exist according to Council science. A tall figure approached them. It had 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. I am Director Vox of the Alliance of the Forgotten. The elders rarely communicate with anyone these days. Why have they sent you to us? Miller explained about the Void Swarm and what the elders had revealed about the Paradox technology. Vox's skin darkened to a deep blue. So it has begun. The seals are breaking. You knew this would happen? Reed asked. We have lived outside Council space for generations, Vox replied. Our ancestors refused to abandon the original science. They were exiled for it, but they passed down warnings about the weapons of the ancient war. Will you help us fight the swarm? Miller asked directly. Vox studied them carefully. Humans are new to space, yet you've rediscovered the original science faster than any species in history. Some here will see that as a sign. A sign of what? Walker asked. That the time of simplification is ending, Vox answered. Come, your ship will need modifications if it's to stand against the swarm. For the next 3 days, the outcasts worked with the Paradox crew, enhancing the ship with their forgotten knowledge. Reed worked alongside alien scientists, absorbing centuries of hidden science. Bell integrated exotic materials into the engine systems. Walker studied weapons that could affect reality itself. On the 4th day, as they prepared to depart, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Council ships approaching, announced a voice over the station's comm system. Vox rushed to Miller. How did they find us? I don't know, Miller replied honestly. The elders said they would keep the council distracted. Vox's skin turned a worried gray. It doesn't matter now. You must leave immediately. We will hold them off. Miller shook his head. We won't abandon you. You must, Vox insisted. The swarm is the greater threat. If you engage the council here, the swarm will grow too powerful to stop. Reed checked her scanner. Captain, a large council fleet has entered the nebula. At least 20 warships. Miller faced a difficult choice: fight alongside their new allies, or continue their mission to stop the swarm. We'll draw them away from the station, he decided. If we can lead them out of the nebula, you'll have time to evacuate. Vox nodded gratefully. We will send ships to join you against the swarm when we can. Now go. The Paradox departed quickly, its new systems humming with power. As they cleared the station, the council fleet came into view, impressive warships moving in formation. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. The main screen activated, showing the stern face of Admiral Wren, the council's military commander. Captain Miller, Wren said coldly, you have violated council law, stolen restricted technology, and now consort with exiles. You are ordered to surrender your ship immediately. Miller stood tall. Admiral, there's a greater threat approaching. Silence. Wren interrupted. Your deceptions end now. Stand down or be destroyed. As Miller prepared to respond, Walker suddenly shouted. Energy spike. Massive distortion at the edge of the system. All eyes turned to the view screen as space itself seemed to tear open. A dark, roiling mass emerged. The void swarm, now 3 times larger than when they had faced it at Teller. Admiral, Miller said urgently, that is the real enemy. The swarm will consume your ships and everything else in its path. But it was too late for warnings. The swarm surged forward, engulfing the nearest council ship in seconds. As the council fleet turned to face this new threat, Miller knew the real battle was just beginning. Chaos erupted as the void swarm tore through the council fleet. 3 warships vanished in moments, consumed by the dark mass that seemed to grow with each victory. The remaining council vessels fired desperately, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the swarm, or were absorbed, making it stronger. On the bridge of the Paradox, Captain Miller watched grimly. Admiral Wren, he said, reopening the communication channel. Your weapons won't work against the swarm. Let us help you. Admiral Wren's face appeared on screen, his earlier arrogance replaced by fear. What is this abomination? A weapon from an ancient war, Miller explained quickly. It consumes matter and energy. Conventional weapons just make it stronger. Another council ship disappeared into the darkness. Wren's face hardened. What do you propose, Captain? My ship has been modified to fight the swarm. Get your remaining vessels behind us. We'll create a path for retreat. Wren hesitated, clearly torn between pride and survival. Finally, he nodded. Very well. But this changes nothing regarding your violations. Miller turned to his crew as the communication ended. Battle stations. Dr. Reed, prepare the reality distortion field for combat configuration. Reed's hands flew over her console. The new modifications from the outcasts should let us create localized reality bubbles. We can trap portions of the swarm and change the physics inside those bubbles. And the main weapon? Miller asked. Walker responded, charged and ready. But we only have enough power for one shot. Miller nodded. We'll save it for when we need it most. Bell, how are the engines? The new configurations are holding. Bell reported from engineering. But I've never seen power readings like this. We're bending a lot of rules here, Captain. That's the idea, Miller said with grim determination. Let's show this thing what happens when you threaten our galaxy. The Paradox moved forward, positioning itself between the retreating council ships and the advancing swarm. The dark entity seemed to sense the different nature of the human vessel and focused its attention on this new threat. It's coming for us, Walker reported. Good, Miller replied. Reed. Activate the distortion bubbles. Reed pressed a sequence of controls. Bubbles deployed. Around the Paradox, 5 spheres of warped space appeared, each with different properties. As tendrils of the swarm entered these bubbles, strange things happened. In one bubble, the darkness solidified into crystal. In another, it dissolved into harmless light. In a third, it froze in place, unable to move. It's working, Walker exclaimed. But their victory was short-lived. The main body of the swarm adjusted quickly, avoiding the bubbles and continuing its advance. It's learning, Reed warned. The bubbles won't work twice on the same section. Miller gripped the arms of his command chair. Bell pushed the engines to maximum. Walker, fire phase disruptors. The Paradox surged forward, weapons blazing. The phase disruptors, technology provided by the Outcasts, fired energy that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Where they struck, the swarm recoiled, unable to adapt to something that was and wasn't there at the same time. For several minutes, the battle raged. The Paradox danced around the swarm, striking and retreating, each attack forcing the entity to adjust. But the strain on the ship grew with every maneuver. Hull integrity failing in sections 3 through 7, Bell reported. The reality distortion field is putting enormous stress on our structure. A violent shudder ran through the ship as a tendril of darkness struck them directly. Direct hit to the port engine, Walker shouted. We're losing power. Miller looked at the tactical display. The council ships had escaped to a safe distance, but the swarm was still massive and growing. Their attacks were only slowing it down, not defeating it. We need a new approach, Miller said. Reed, what would happen if we detonated our main drive core inside the reality distortion field? Reed's eyes widened. The explosion would be contained within the field, creating a pocket of completely unstructured reality. It could reset the physical laws within that space too. Well, nothing. Could that destroy the swarm? In theory, yes. But we'd have to be inside the field when it happens. Miller nodded. Can we program the ship to maintain the field around the engine section only, then detach that section? Reed thought for a moment. Yes, but someone would need to stay behind to ensure the field remains stable until detonation. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Miller stood. I'll do it. No, Reed said firmly. It needs to be me. I'm the only one who fully understands how the field works with the modifications. You need to command the rest of the ship to safety. Before Miller could argue, the ship rocked with another hit. We're out of time, Walker warned. The swarm is surrounding us. Miller looked at Reed, seeing the determination in her eyes. He knew she was right. Begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel to the forward section, he ordered. Prepare for emergency separation. As the crew rushed to comply, Miller turned to Reed. You're sure about this? She nodded. The elders showed us that reality is more flexible than we ever imagined. Maybe that applies to life and death too. She managed a small smile. Besides, someone needs to tell Earth about all this. Minutes later, the Paradox had been evacuated. Only Reed remained in the engine section, surrounded by the humming reality distortion generators. The rest of the crew, including Miller, were in the forward section, ready to separate. All personnel secure, Walker reported. Separation mechanism charge. Miller opened a final communication to read. Emma. Her face appeared on screen. It's been an honor, James. Now get our people home. Miller nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Initiate separation. With a series of loud clangs, the paradox split in two. The forward section, resembling a large shuttle, moved quickly away. The engine section, still containing the reality distortion field generators and the main drive, drifted toward the heart of the swarm. From the command console of the escape craft, Miller watched as Reed guided the engine section deeper into the darkness. She's reached the center, Walker said quietly. Reed's voice came through, broken by static. Field is stable. Drive core overload in 10 seconds. Good luck. Paradox. The next moments seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, suddenly, a blinding flash erupted where the engine section had been. But instead of expanding outward like a normal explosion, the light collapsed inward, creating a perfect sphere of nothing. The sphere expanded rapidly, engulfing the void swarm. Where the sphere passed, the darkness simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not transformed, just gone, as if it had never been there. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the sphere collapsed back to a single point and vanished. What just happened? Walker asked, staring at the now empty space. Miller checked the sensors. The swarm is gone. Completely. A console beeped. Captain, the communications officer said with surprise, we're receiving a transmission. It's Dr. Reed. Miller jumped to his feet. Put it through. The view screen flickered, showing Reed inside what appeared to be a small escape pod. She looked as surprised as they were. I don't understand, she said. The pod ejected automatically just before detonation. But the odds of surviving that. The elders, Miller realized. They must have added more modifications than they told us. Before they could celebrate further, multiple council ships approached, led by Admiral Wren's flagship. Captain Miller, Wren's voice came through. What did we just witness? Miller straightened his uniform. The defeat of the greatest threat this galaxy has faced in millions of years. Admiral. There was a long pause before Wren spoke again. The Council will want explanations. About everything. They'll get them, Miller promised. But they need to understand that the universe is changing. The old rules, their rules, won't be enough anymore. As the rescue pod carrying Reed was recovered, and the remains of the paradox were surrounded by council ships, Miller knew that nothing would be the same again. Humans had not just bent the laws of physics, they had helped reshape the future of the galaxy. In the distance, unseen by human or council sensors, the eldership watched. The experiment had succeeded better than they had hoped. Humans had not only mastered fragments of the original science, but had used it wisely. Perhaps it was finally time for the simplified universe to evolve once more. The human warship had defied every law, and in doing so, had begun to write new ones.